Welcome back to Crime Time, Inc. I think Tom is really going to like this one today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Rosenberg case.
Okay.
Julius and Ethel Rosenberg.
Right?
Accused of espionage.
Espionage.
Convicted and executed back in the 1950s.
Wow.
It's a story that's got it all.
Oh, really?
Atomic secrets, Cold War paranoia, questions about justice that lingered to even today.
That's a good one.
And get this.
Okay.
We've got FBI records,
Uh-huh.
historical accounts,
Mm-hmm.
even personal letters to work with.
Wow, that's fascinating. What's really interesting is that this whole thing unfolds right at the dawn of the Cold War. You've got to imagine the tension. The U.S. and Soviet Union
Right.
locked in this ideological battle,
Uh-huh.
both with their fingers on the nuclear button.
Jeez.
The fear of communist infiltration was very real.
So paint the picture for us.
Okay.
1949, the FBI discovers that someone's leaked atomic bomb secrets. Panic sets in, and the hunt for the culprit begins.
Yeah.
Where do they start?
Well, they zero in on Julius Rosenberg.
Okay.
He'd worked as an engineer,
Go ahead.
had access to sensitive information,
Mm-hmm.
and crucially, had ties to the Communist Party.
Ah.
To the FBI, he looked like the center of a spy ring,
Yeah. Huh?
feeding vital information to the Soviets.
And they really bring the pressure, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't just go after Julius.
Right.
They use his wife, Ethel, as leverage.
Mm-hmm.
That's got to be tough.
It was a calculated tactic.
Yeah.
They believed that Julius wouldn't crack under the pressure of his own potential execution.
Oh, wow.
But the threat to Ethel,
Yeah.
they thought might be the breaking point.
Really?
They saw her as the key to getting Julius to talk.
So they dig deep into their lives, their beliefs, their associations, anything to build a case. What do they find?
Well, the FBI unearths Julius and Ethel's past communist affiliations, their connections to known Soviet agents,
Right.
and Julius's access to classified information during his time as an engineer.
Yeah.
Remember, being a communist in those days wasn't like joining a book club.
Right.
It was seen as a direct threat to American values and national security.
And it wasn't long before the investigation widened, bringing in others like Ethel's brother, David Greenglass, who worked at Los Alamos on the Manhattan Project, and Morton Soba.
Right, and Greenglass, he becomes a central figure.
Okay.
He admits to passing atomic secrets to the Soviets.
Oh, wow.
And his testimony will ultimately be crucial in the trial against the Rosenbergs.
Uh-huh.
However, even at the time, his credibility was questioned.
Really?
There were suggestions that he may have exaggerated Ethel's role to protect his own wife.
So the stage is set for one of the most dramatic trials in American history.
It is.
March 1951. The Rosenbergs face a jury.
Mm-hmm.
The world is watching.
Yeah.
And the stakes couldn't be higher.
And what makes this trial so captivating, so enduring?
Is that it becomes about much more than just espionage.
Right.
It taps into the deepest anxieties of the Cold War era.
Okay.
Fear of the enemy within, the threat of nuclear annihilation, and the potential fragility of American democracy itself.
Before we dive into the trial itself,
Okay.
I want to go back to the human element of this story.
Mm-hmm.
We have this letter from one of the Rosenberg sons, Michael,
Right.
written to President Eisenhower.
Yeah.
He's just a kid,
Oh.
pleading for his parents.
Oh, that's sad.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
He writes about how good his parents are, how much he loves them.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that behind the headlines,
Right.
behind the political intrigue,
Yeah.
there were real people,
Uh-huh.
real families caught in the crossfire of this historical drama.
It's easy to forget that sometimes, to get lost in the facts and the arguments.
Yeah,
But that letter brings it home.
it does. The human cost, the emotional toll of this case.
And the human element,
Right.
that sense of tragedy,
Yeah.
is something we need to keep in mind as we delve deeper into the complexities of the trial and its aftermath.
For sure. This Rosenberg trial wasn't just a courtroom drama
Right.
playing out in New York City.
Yeah.
It became a global event.
Really?
News of the trial,
Uh-huh.
the accusations, the potential execution of an American couple for espionage.
Wow.
It all gripped the world's attention.
It's hard to imagine the pressure.
It
A weight of the world watching
Yeah.
the accusations flying must have been surreal for everyone involved.
Oh, absolutely.
What was the global reaction like?
Well, particularly in Europe,
Okay.
there was a wave of sympathy for the Rosenbergs.
Interesting.
Many saw them as victims of American McCarthyism,
Uh-huh.
a symbol of the excesses of anti-communist fervor.
So they became almost like
They did.
folk heroes,
Yeah,
symbols of resistance against what many saw as American paranoia.
precisely.
Wow.
And this played right into the hands of the Soviet Union.
Oh, really?
They used the Rosenberg case as a propaganda tool, pointing to it as evidence of American hypocrisy, of the supposed suppression of dissent and violation of civil liberties.
So the trial becomes this international incident
It does.
with protests erupting across the globe.
Huge protests.
It really shows how deeply the Cold War had permeated every aspect of life,
It does.
even the legal system.
Absolutely.
Wow.
You had massive demonstrations in major cities.
Yeah.
London, Paris,
Right.
Rome,
Okay.
people picketing U.S. embassies, signing petitions, demanding clemency for the Rosenbergs.
Oh.
This wasn't just a legal case anymore. It was a
yeah.
political lightning rod.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and delve into the actual evidence presented at the trial.
All right.
What were the main arguments for and against their guilt?
Well, the prosecution built their case largely on the testimony of David Greenglass. Right.
Ethel's brother?
Ethel's brother.
Yeah.
He claimed he gave Julius sensitive information about the atomic bomb and that Ethel was involved,
Okay.
typing up his notes.
But we talked earlier about Greenglass's credibility being questionable.
We did.
Did the prosecution have anything else to corroborate his story?
They did.
Okay.
They pointed to the Venona Project,
What's that?
a top-secret American effort to decrypt Soviet communications.
Oh, wow.
Some of those decrypted messages,
Yeah.
they argued, referenced Julius Rosenberg using the codename Liberal,
Interesting.
suggesting his involvement in espionage.
So that must have been a major blow to the defense.
It was.
Having these decrypted messages seemingly confirming Julius's connection to the Soviets.
It was a significant piece of evidence, no doubt.
Yeah.
The prosecution also pointed to items found in the Rosenbergs' apartment,
Like what?
like a console table they claimed was a gift from Soviet agents. And they highlighted the Rosenbergs' refusal to answer questions about their communist affiliations during the trial, suggesting they had something to hide.
So, a seemingly strong case for the prosecution,
It seemed that way.
especially in the context of Cold War paranoia. What did the defense argue?
The defense countered that the evidence against Ethel in particular
Yeah.
was flimsy.
Okay.
They argued that it relied heavily on the testimony of her brother,
Right.
whose motives were suspect.
Uh-huh.
They painted Ethel as a loving wife and mother,
Yeah.
caught in the web of her husband's alleged activities,
Okay.
but not an active participant herself.
So essentially they were saying that Ethel was being punished for being Julius's wife,
In a way.
that she was collateral damage in this much larger Cold War game of espionage.
That was a key part of their argument.
It's interesting.
They also pointed to inconsistencies in the testimony against the Rosenbergs
Okay.
and argued that much of the information Julius allegedly passed on was already known to the Soviets, making his supposed contribution minimal.
But wouldn't that raise the question of why he was targeted by the Soviets in the first place?
Right.
Why risk recruiting someone who could potentially provide information they already had?
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
And it's one of the many lingering mysteries surrounding this case.
Right.
The defense also emphasized the Rosenbergs' steadfast denials of guilt,
Yeah.
even when offered a deal to save their lives if they confessed.
Wow.
They argued that this unwavering insistence on their innocence demonstrated their truthfulness.
That must have been a powerful argument. After all, who would willingly go to their deaths if they had a chance to live?
Right.
Unless they truly believed they were innocent.
Right.
It certainly adds another layer of complexity to an already convoluted case.
It does.
Wow.
And that complexity,
Yeah.
that lack of a definitive smoking gun,
Uh-huh.
is part of what makes this case so enduring, so debated, even decades later.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are
And there are still so many unanswered questions.
so many.
But before we dive into the aftermath of the trial,
Okay.
I want to address one more crucial aspect,
Okay.
the ethical considerations.
Right. The Rosenberg case is rife with ethical dilemmas. Even some who believe Julius may have been involved in espionage
Yeah.
question the fairness of the trial,
Yeah.
the severity of the sentence,
Right.
and whether Ethel should have been convicted at all,
Yeah.
given the lack of concrete evidence against her. I mean, the use of the death penalty to pressure a confession,
Right.
particularly when there are doubts about the strength of the evidence. It's a troubling aspect of this case.
It is.
Raises serious questions
Yeah.
about the balance between national security and individual rights, about the very principles of justice that America claims to uphold.
And we can't forget the impact on the Rosenberg children,
Right.
who were orphaned by the executions.
Yeah, it's awful.
They faced intense public scrutiny,
Right.
the weight of their parents' legacy,
Mm-hmm.
the stigma of being the children of convicted spies.
Right.
It's a reminder that the consequences of these events extend far beyond the courtroom,
Absolutely.
affecting generations to come.
Yeah. The Rosenberg case serves as a cautionary tale,
It does.
a reminder of the dangers of allowing fear and political expediency to override due process and fundamental fairness.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our own history and to grapple with the enduring challenge of balancing national security concerns with the protection of individual liberties.
It's a conversation that's as relevant today as it was back then,
It really is.
especially in a world where the threats may have changed, but the potential for overreach and the abuse of power remain.
Absolutely. The Rosenberg case is more than just a historical footnote.
Right.
It's a lens through which we can examine the complexities of espionage,
Yeah.
the dilemmas of justice,
Uh-huh.
and the enduring human cost of Cold War paranoia.
And speaking of complexities,
Yeah,
there have been some fascinating developments in recent years.
there have.
Add even more layers to this already intricate story.
Right.
Let's talk about those.
Okay.
One of the most significant
Yeah.
was Morton Sobel's confession in 2008. After decades of maintaining his innocence, he finally admitted to having been a Soviet spy.
Really?
However, he insisted that the information he passed along
Yeah.
involved radar and other military technology,
Okay.
not atomic secrets.
Interesting.
He also maintained that Ethel Rosenberg was not involved in any espionage activities.
So his confession, while confirming a spy ring did exist,
Right.
also cast doubt on the government's narrative,
Uh-huh.
particularly regarding Ethel's role.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It suggests that the scope of the conspiracy may have been narrower than initially portrayed,
it does.
and that the government, in its zeal to root out communist infiltration,
Right.
may have overstated the Rosenbergs' involvement,
Yeah,
especially Ethel's.
especially Ethel's.
Then there's the release of the grand jury transcripts in 2008 and 2015.
Yeah.
These revealed inconsistencies in the testimony of David and Ruth Greenglass
Yeah.
compared to what they said at trial.
Those inconsistencies are significant.
They are.
They raise further questions about the reliability of the Greenglass's testimony,
Right.
which, as you'll recall,
Yeah.
was the cornerstone of the prosecution's case.
And as if this story couldn't get any more intriguing,
Right.
there's also the release of notes from KGB archives,
Uh-huh.
known as the Vasilyev Notebooks,
Okay.
in 2009.
The Vasilyev notebooks offer a glimpse into the Soviet perspective on the Rosenbergs.
Interesting.
They confirm that Julius was considered a valuable asset,
Uh-huh.
but they downplay Ethel's role,
Okay.
suggesting she was aware of her husband's activities but didn't actively participate.
So after this deep dive into the Rosenberg case,
Yeah.
the espionage, the trial, the global reaction,
Right.
the ethical dilemmas, and the recent revelations,
Mm-hmm.
where do we land?
It's hard to say.
What can we conclude?
I think the most honest answer is that we can't definitively conclude anything.
Yeah,
The Rosenberg case remains a puzzle,
it does.
a historical enigma
Right?
with compelling arguments on both sides.
Were they masterminds of a devastating spy ring that hastened the Soviet Union's development of the atomic bomb?
Right.
Or were they scapegoats,
Yeah.
victims of a political climate fueled by fear and suspicion?
Tough to say.
The evidence, as we've seen, is contradictory.
It is.
The motivations of key players are murky, and the truth, as it often is in matters of espionage, remains elusive.
This deep dive has given you the tools,
It has.
the context, the
Yeah.
different perspectives to form your own opinion.
Right.
What do you think? Were the Rosenbergs guilty as charged, or were they victims of a historical witch hunt?
Right.
The answer ultimately lies in your interpretation of the evidence,
Yeah.
your understanding of the historical context,
Yeah.
and your own sense of justice.
And if this deep dive has piqued your interest,
Yeah.
we encourage you to delve deeper into the source material.
Absolutely.
The FBI records the trial transcripts, the personal letters. They're all available,
There.
waiting to be explored.
Go check them out.
Tune in tomorrow for another great Crime Time Inc. episode.